Hey there. Like when you're in the grocery store,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Checkout line, and your kid just decides it's meltdown time.
Oh, tell me about it.
We've all been there. It's like it makes you question everything, trying to raise good kids, but
Right, and you're like, "What's the manual for this?"
exactly. And that's where this book, Parenting with Love and Logic, comes in,
Yeah.
which you've asked us to deep dive into.
It's so true. Those moments can really get to you. But it's interesting, right? Because sometimes, even when we mean well, our reactions can actually make things harder in the long run.
Make things harder. Okay,
Mm.
now I'm really interested. Tell me more about that. What are some of these things parents do that we should watch out for?
Well, the book talks about these three main parenting styles. They seem different on the surface, but often lead to similar problems. Helicopter parent, drill sergeant parent, laissez-faire.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely seen those in action and maybe even been guilty of them myself at times.
Haven't we all?
So let's break those down a bit. First, the helicopter parent, always hovering, swooping in to fix every little thing. I get it, we want to protect them. But what's so bad about a little hovering?
The thing is, when we always rescue them, they don't learn how to handle things themselves. They grow up not knowing how to cope. Imagine them as adults, right? They're going to feel lost and overwhelmed.
So, trying to protect them too much actually backfires.
Exactly. It's like we've set them up to fail in a way. Then there's the drill sergeant, all about commands, do this because I said so. Gets things done in the moment, but what does it teach them in the long run? About making their own choices.
Yeah, I can see that. They're so used to being told what to do, they never learn to think for themselves. So what about the opposite, just letting them figure it all out on their own? Is that the answer?
Well, it sounds good, but kids need some guidance, right? Like even a sailboat needs a rudder. Without boundaries, they can feel lost.
Love that analogy. So, if these common approaches aren't working, what's the alternative? How do we find that balance?
Well, the book suggests focusing on love and logic. They have this great analogy of a three-legged table to explain how to build a strong sense of self in kids.
Ooh, I love a good analogy. So tell me, what are the three legs of this parenting table?
Okay, so picture this. The first leg is about feeling truly unconditionally loved, and it's about separating their worth from their actions.
So even when they're driving us up the wall, they still need to know we love them no matter what. I can see how that's important, but how do we actually get that across?
It's less about saying it and more about showing it,
Yeah.
creating that environment where they just know they're loved for who they are, not what they do.
It's like that safe space, that feeling of belonging no matter what.
Uh,
Gotcha. All right, leg one down. What's next?
Leg two is about experiencing success. And I don't mean just winning or being the best. It's about encouraging them to try new things, to push themselves a bit, and then feel good about what they accomplish.
So not doing everything for them, but giving them the chance to shine in their own way.
Yes. And how we react matters too. Instead of, you're so smart, try something like, wow, you stuck with that until you figured it out. That's amazing.
Right, so it's about building that I can do it attitude, that belief in themselves.
Exactly. And that leads us nicely to the third leg, letting them learn from natural consequences.
Okay, that's the one I struggle with, I'll admit. It's tough to watch them mess up, even if it's something small.
It's hard, for sure. Our instinct is to protect them. But remember that example from the book with little Emily and her dog Snuggles. She kept forgetting to feed him.
Oh, yeah, right?
So instead of nagging, Mom let things play out. She arranged for Snuggles to stay with a neighbor for a few days.
Oh, that's clever. Much more impactful than a lecture, I bet.
Right. And when Snuggles went to the neighbors, it clicked for Emily. She saw the connection between her actions or inaction and the result. And here's the key. Mom did it all with empathy, not anger.
It's about letting go of that need to control everything, isn't it?
Yes. It's not about being permissive, it's about picking your battles. Let natural consequences happen when it's safe and makes sense, and use it as a learning experience.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've given us a lot to think about on building that solid foundation. But what about those day-to-day battles? The book gets into tantrums, chores, backseat bickering. What are some go-to love and logic moves for those?
Let's start with that classic grocery store meltdown. You're in the checkout line, cart's overflowing, and your kid decides it's showtime. What do you do?
Oh, I've been there. Usually try to reason with them, which we all know is totally pointless in that moment. So what's the better way?
First, don't engage in that power struggle. Instead of yelling or trying to reason with a kid who's lost it, just calmly acknowledge their feelings. Then, give them a choice. I see you're upset. You can calm down here, or we can go sit in the car until you're ready.
Ah, I like that. Not giving in, but giving them some control within limits.
Exactly. And because you're giving a choice, it takes the wind out of their sails. No more battle.
Game changer.
Yeah.
Okay, what about chores? Any tips for those arguments?
This may sound counterintuitive, but make it their problem, not yours. Instead of nagging, try this. Dinner's at 6. Feel free to join us when your chores are done.
So their choice chores and dinner, or no chores and a grumbling stomach.
Wait.
Like it.
It empowers them. And again, it removes that power struggle.
Love it. Okay, now for those car rides that can turn ugly fast,
Yeah.
any advice for keeping the peace when you're trapped?
Oh, the backseat battlefield. One thing the book suggests is the oxygen replenishment strategy.
Okay, now that sounds interesting. Tell me more.
It's simple. When the arguing gets bad, safely pull over and explain that all that bickering is probably low oxygen levels. Then have them get out, walk around a bit, replenish that oxygen.
I love that. It's like hitting the reset button. And hey, maybe you get a little walk in yourself while you're at it.
Right. Redirect that energy. Everyone gets a breather, literally.
Speaking of breathers, what about homework struggles? How do we stay calm when they just don't want to do it? I feel like they save up all their resistance for the moment you say homework time. Right.
It's about shifting the ownership a bit. It's not about forcing them. It's about creating that opportunity where they're choosing to do it, you know?
Okay, I like that. So how do we make it more of a choice and less of a battle?
One thing you can try is to have a set homework time each night. Let them pick where they do it, their room, the kitchen, whatever. The key is they agree to sit down with their books for that time.
So even if they just stare at the wall for an hour, that's their choice.
Exactly. It's about setting that routine, that expectation. They're in control of how they use that time.
I see. It takes the fight out of it. Interesting. Now, what about report cards? When they bring those home, and let's face it, they're not always perfect. How do we handle that conversation?
This goes back to what we were talking about before, those natural consequences and owning their choices. So instead of lecturing or brushing it off like it's nothing, approach it with curiosity. Ask them, what do you think about this grade? Are you happy with it? Any ideas on how to improve?
So guiding them to figure it out themselves, rather than us taking over or dismissing it.
Right. We want them to be able to look at things critically, not just be good at following rules.
Makes sense. Now, we've been focusing a lot on our own kids, but parenting doesn't happen in a bubble, right? What about grandparents? They can be a big influence, but what if they're not on board with this love and logic stuff?
Yeah, that can be tricky. It all comes down to talking to them, explaining your approach and why you're doing it.
So even if they do things differently, at least everyone's on the same page?
Yes, especially with things like discipline, consistency is key. And that leads to another thing that can be tricky, blended families. I bet love and logic can be really helpful in those situations, right?
Yeah, trying to blend different parenting styles, different family cultures. It's a lot.
It is. But again, it's about communication, setting clear expectations together, and being a united front, even if you and your partner come from different backgrounds.
So important. And what about another tough one? Divorce. How can parents going through that use love and logic to help their kids?
Divorce is rough, no way around it, but honesty is key. Let the kids know it's not their fault and that both parents love them, even if they're not living together anymore.
Reassuring them that even though things are changing, the love is still there.
Exactly. And remember, actions speak louder than words. Kids pick up on everything. So showing them how to handle things in a healthy way is huge.
It's like we're parenting ourselves at the same time.
Yeah.
Managing our own stuff.
Totally. We're all learning as we go. Parenting is a journey, that's for sure.
That it is. This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new perspective and some real strategies to try out. So as we wrap up, let me ask you, remember that three-legged table we talked about? What's one small thing you can do today to make one of those legs a little stronger for your child? Maybe it's offering a choice instead of a command, or taking a breath before reacting, or just telling them you love them. Whatever it is, know that you're not alone on this journey. We're all in it together, figuring it out as we go.